also trying
photos
to get the
in
Insta
front of this.
video. Um, hold on. So stuff is pretty interesting right now, to be honest with you. I didn't expect this to happen so soon.
Yeah, I thought if anything it was going to be no kings, which is coming up, but yeah, this might make things a little spicier next week if this can continue. So I don't know if this thing's going to be put down or not, but or if it's going to spread to other cities.
That is an open question, and, hold on, I'm just trying to get the Instagram to work. Hold on.
No problem.
That, um so let's see, is Insta going now? Why isn't Insta going? There we go. That's weird. Um, yeah, Ryan, it's interesting because when we went through May Day and kind of just, like, leading into May Day, yeah, we saw a surge in April, which I think was No Kings affiliated.
Right.
But it wasn't that significant, and it still felt like there was a lot of confusion on what the core message was gonna be. And I guess these ICE operations maybe started to intensify in the last couple of weeks. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely, and especially the manner in which they're done, where officers are often in plain clothes. They just show up out of nowhere. There's a lot of confusion, and yeah, I think that's one of the things that's helping to drive this a lot.
Yeah, and we know that immigration became a much bigger focus as, um, the movements realized that Trump was going to take the White House on January 20th or whatever the day was. So, obviously we started really honing in on what the movements were doing at March on DNC. And I'm sure if we pulled back old March on DNC footage, immigration wasn't like a big talking point.
No, well, and also once Elon was in the picture with Doge, the two of them just kind of dominated things for the first few months because there was the chaos and all of these different parts of the government that weren't sure if they were still going to exist. They kept saying, "Oh, we're going to get rid of this department and that department," and then they're in limbo, and they're like, "Well, actually, we need Congress to uh, to take this funding away. You can't just get rid of it. Maybe he can call out, here's where there's some money that's misspent or corrupt or whatever." But that dominated the narrative for so long, and certainly, I don't think immigration was ignored. I mean, I forget the name of the march, but the one back in April, at least here in New York City, there was
Yeah.
125, 150,000 people, and that's when you had people with a million different messages. It was just only rallied around the idea of anti-Trump, but nothing really specific. I mean, you saw small groups focused on immigration, but you had other people with their own particular interests, um, and no real cohesion between them. But this could be a rallying point now that Elon is out, and I don't.
Yeah.
Some people are speculating on whether this whole Elon feud is orchestrated, between Trump and Elon. I think this is pretty real at this point. They've said some pretty crazy things. Um,
Crazy.
yeah, um,
Borderline heinous.
right. So at this point, they do need something else to rally behind, and this could be it. But I'm curious to see how this plays out because if these riots get out of control, I mean, in some cases, you still have legitimate protesters, but you have had some like riotous activity. Um,
Yep.
is that going to make the movement look bad? I think both sides need to think about optics. And in Trump's case, I think for him, he actually, in some ways, wants things to get worse because, for one, it certainly scares off more immigrants from coming here. Um, we know just from like tourist numbers, like foreign tourists are not coming to the U.S. I mean, they're down significantly,
Sure.
I think somewhere around like 10%, and we'll have to see how that plays out throughout the summer. But and we don't know the exact numbers of border crossings and stuff like that, but it does seem to be down significantly, especially compared to what was going on during Biden's administration. But but yeah, if you cause so much fear, you're also going to deter the people that you want to come here, or the people who live here that now want to leave. um,
Sure.
it's so yeah, we don't. I don't want to see more chaos, but I worry the tactics in which it seems Trump might be willing to use this time around, because going back to 2020, especially in places like Portland, where you had Antifa and similar groups attacking like a federal courthouse, it went on for like weeks or maybe even months, and not a whole lot was really done. We had multiple cities burning in the U.S. during the Floyd protest turned riots, and Trump was hesitant to kind of put those down. But like Trump 2.0 seems to be much more interested in power and force, and so we don't really know how this is going to play out. But I have a feeling it's not going to be good. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I would add that I don't believe that Trump is skilled at dealing with internal opposition. So we would consider this like internal GOP or like elite opposition. And then I would say that worse than his inability to deal with internal or elite opposition is his complete inability to deal with leftist opposition, right? And I mean, we do have to remember that Trump was in office when the largest transnational movement in at least the modern world history was set off, right? Black Lives Matter. And so this is something that I've done a lot of commentary on. But I think, look, if we went into May and we were noticing sort of fracturing, maybe like 15 or 20, sometimes 30 different policy proclamations from a lot of our friends on the ground. And then we get to some of these ICE interventions and we start to notice, like, okay, man, there were like 5 or 6 escalations this week, not including Los Angeles, right? And I was on the ground today in Pilsen for a movement. I got an interview with Omar and Byron Sigcho Lopez, and some of the other folks were there. But they were a part of the escalation here in Chicago. And again, it fizzled out within about 2.5 hours.
Mhm.
And it was confrontational, but like, we're going to be able to have confrontation with our law enforcement should we decide that we want to take that risk. And then at the same time, these people are organizing in public on public space. It's not like they walked into the detention facility and tried to assault ICE, right? They're confronting
Mhm.
them in public space. And so the movement, their perception or their perspective is that there are a number of people lawfully going through the process to get the correct immigration paperwork filed. And, it's actually like a challenging process. And what ICE is doing is targeting them somewhere in that supply chain where they haven't issued an arrest warrant, but they are literally detaining them in that supply chain, in that process, like at the court, heading into a courtroom. ICE will detain an individual. People aren't really sure what the process is to defend themselves, and they're finding themselves in what some legal analysts might claim is an unlawful detention. And so, as Trump was elected, we saw the signage and the policy proclamations of the movement start to shift towards immigration. And then obviously Trump has been running on anti-immigration sentiment. In fact, in large part, anti-immigration sentiment is part of Republican Party politics. So the left saw the anti-immigration sentiment coming from miles away. And then the idea that Trump promised essentially was that he would run the biggest deportation campaign in American history. And honestly, even when when we were at a talk at the Chicago Council with one of the former like ICE DHS leaders in the Obama administration, he had
Yeah.
mentioned that the volume for that first 30 days or whatever was the same or maybe a little bit less um, weekly than the Biden administration. And so we were sitting here thinking like, okay, how is he going to accelerate it? And then suddenly, ICE has been on this hiring rampage. ICE actually opened up a hiring window on Friday. I don't know if I'm mistaken or if they're hiring 10,000 people. I don't know if I'm mistaken. And so now what we've kind of seen is these ICE operations have started to scale up. I'd say maybe these last 3 weeks, and then there was kind of a direct correlation of increased ICE operation with increased awareness that ICE is operating in the various local communities. And then think of the movements having to kind of like train their people on knowing their rights, uh, taking all of the calls. Like I called into a couple civil rights and civil liberties organizations, but their call volume is like Amazon on like if the website goes down, like they're
Yeah.
just like thousands of calls every week from people who are like scared or not really sure what to do. And so I'll say this. So now we're in this moment which I didn't predict it, right? And I think you were aware of this too. But Trump doesn't deal with external opposition well, and so what he's kind of doing is he's taking this like pretty decentralized, not very well coordinated movement that has some scale, and he is increasing their coordination capabilities. Like, look at the emergency response in Los Angeles that was led by PSL and a couple other organizations that were able to drive 10 or 12,000 people out into Los Angeles in less than 12 hours after they got notice that Trump was going to deploy the National Guard. I could rant, but I'm wondering, Ryan, what other thoughts you have, bro?
Yeah. Well, as far as other things that people could rally behind, because of the way ICE is operating, people have been terrified. Will hear comparisons to the Gestapo and stuff like that. At the same time, we're hearing about Trump wanting to ramp up the surveillance state. So, like these things coinciding at the same time, that could be
Yep,
a rallying point. Because I think it
yep,
is a legitimate concern. I mean, we've had since especially the Patriot Act pop up. There's been this fear of where the surveillance state could go, but it's still what it has been or how it's been used compared to where it might be heading soon, especially if Palantir is able to aggregate all of this stuff between these different agencies and add their latest in analytics. It is kind of terrifying to see these types of tactics and how they might not just be used now, but into the future. Because I think people often just think, well, who's currently in the administration? And if you don't like Trump, that okay, well, once he's gone, maybe you don't have to worry about these things. But you don't know who comes after him and who may use the surveillance state against their own enemies in the future. And that's not a
yeah.
partisan issue either. So
Well, and the surveillance state is basically like the largest scale web scraping of our social media activity ever. Like, remember the NSA mastered the wiretap, which was really just intercepting our communications. They call it SIGINT. Okay. Signals intelligence. Okay. So the
mhm.
NSA mastered signals intelligence. Some people would give Israel credit for that because of their ability to build a program called Pegasus. which basically cracks the mobile device wide open and makes every element accessible to the actor that deploys Pegasus on that endpoint. But my point is, now we're in this era where they're doing large scale web scraping on our activities online.
Mm.
And like one of the dimensions of political repression that does make me a little nervous right now is the over labeling of individuals being terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. Because if I'm not mistaken, terrorism has been used as like an all purpose justification for massive third party intervention, violations of international law and human rights, and then protracted wars, right?
Yep.
Uh, and then so now what? Like, oh, you like are cool with this organization, so now our data set puts you like here, and then what? We can get a warrant because like Palantir told ICE that you sit in this circle, and now what? The FBI is coming to our home for like talking on the internet, like we live in China.
Yeah, well, it doesn't even have to be someone coming to your home. One of the ways that they can easily abuse this is if you're traveling, um, because they have different rules for someone like TSA or Homeland more broadly. Um, we've heard journalists like it was Max Blumenthal who was just stopped recently, and they didn't really have a good reason to stop him, but they took him to an interrogation room and were there to basically just harass him and maybe strike fear in him. But it's like that's something that's already it seems to is being abused. But where does that go next? Especially if we do start to see more of these protests that become riots. That they say, oh well, now these people truly are they are the threat we thought they were. So now we're going to start
Yeah,
cracking down even harder. And yeah, it's definitely concerning. So who knows? Maybe this is one of those things where it'll blow over and it'll calm down for a bit. But because No Kings is coming up, if I worry about a lot of this comes down to how law enforcement reacts. Because I think what we've seen, especially in Chicago, in New York, the police have been great at de-escalating, especially in
yep,
Chicago. Like DNC last year, there was a couple times, multiple times, where we thought, oh, this is about to really go off the rails and
yeah.
get really scary and crazy. But each time the cops made sure to de-escalate. Um, but if you don't have guys that are trained well or they're trained differently, because some will say will actually emphasize escalation in some way as a like a show of force to think that maybe that will get people to go away, but that doesn't that often backfires. Um, I definitely worry that that could happen, and all it takes is one lone officer to do something that's over the top before the crowd loses its mind, and then everyone loses their mind. So
I agree. And
mm,
I'll say this too, knowing what we know about protests, being physically present in them. So, like anybody from the movement that's watching this now knows that we're not camera jockeys or like people that sit behind our desks at the crib. Like, we're going to be there when it goes whatever direction it goes, right? And we've been. But knowing what we know about protest dynamics and protest law enforcement interactions. I mean, like, and we'll have to play the footage at some point of me like squeezing myself into the pocket, okay, of that situation at March on DNC. But this situation in LA, in my opinion, was maybe 1,000 people max, maybe, and it was a confrontation, and it got a little sketchy, and then maybe some fools burned some cars, and I honestly think it'd be done. I think it would have fizzled out last night, and then Trump said that he was gonna send 2,000 National Guardsmen in, and then Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, I can't even believe it, Pete Hegseth says that he's gonna mobilize the Marines, and then come to find out, Trump's the way that Trump structured his order of the National Guard hasn't been used since Lyndon Johnson deployed the National Guard into Selma, Alabama, to protect a Martin Luther King march against George C. Wallace and his cronies, right? So like we're like hitting these new levels of authoritarianism or this kind of idea of a military dictatorship. And also the orders that Trump puts out, not only do they confuse like the general public and the protesters, but they confuse the state and political actors. Like, I'm sure Gavin Newsom had to call the attorney general and be like, and then the mayor of Los Angeles, she said that she's spoken to the chief of staff at the White House and asked them not to do this. And then they just kind of reiterate this idea of like, call for peace or whatever. And like, I'm not going to front on the ground. Most of the like center moderate Democrats are not getting through to the left. So whether they call for peace or not makes no difference. One of the lead organizers at the march today brought this up, but he's like, there's multiple levels of escalation that take place. And to his point, at some point, the movement is feeling a much worse sentiment towards the agency and has almost got a kind of psyche that is prepared for a confrontation and is willing to hang in there. And then you see these little skirmishes. And the question is the police going to do a heavy crackdown and a crazy intervention where they start batoning and throwing smoke and grenades and then arresting people? Or, is there another way to go about it where they could absorb the issue? And then, like, right now, we're like sitting on the threat of a contagion from Los Angeles, right? Because the major metros are calling each other right now. People are flying into Los Angeles to see it with their own eyes. There's an emergency response coming up in Chicago on Tuesday. We'll look and see when New York's is coming. But the emergency response is a sort of mobilization capability that like develops capacity as people start to get into the cadence. It takes a couple cycles to get into the cadence. And then next thing you know, an event hits the news and there's 20,000 people in the street of Chicago and 80,000 people in the street of New York City, and people are burning cars in Baltimore, and Atlanta's flipping over hotel buildings. I mean, like it will get there at some point if the people in power are not if they don't understand how to deal with opposition. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely concerned that the way Trump is treated the whole tariff thing, he's just been reckless and thinks that, well, if he has a policy, he can get away with it. And then by the time he gets to a deal, he realizes, well, maybe he doesn't even realize it. It doesn't end up, it still ends up being negative for the US, but he'll still call it a deal. But in this case, like trying to escalate here to think that he can easily control the situation, especially when you got Hegseth, like you mentioned, wanting to bring the Marines in. I think that wouldn't just radicalize the left. That will radicalize the whole country in many ways, because that's just insane.
Yeah.
So I hope someone talks some sanity into them. I don't know who at the White House or in their circle can do that, but this doesn't need to get out of
Maybe
control.
Steve Bannon. Maybe Stephen Bannon can bring some clarity.
Yeah.
Or
let him be the voice of reason.
Yeah, maybe Laura Loomer can bring some clarity. Or J.D. Vance. Peter Thiel. I mean, like, I don't think anybody can tame this monster that has become the second-term president, Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, and then especially on media, Trump's like biggest cheerleaders, when they hear him saying he's going to send in the guard, or Hegseth is talking about the Marines potentially going in, that they're excited about that. They think, oh, they're going to start cracking heads and they're going to show them who's boss. Not even thinking, could this backfire? Not that it will inevitably backfire, because maybe it won't.
Right.
But there's a good chance that it will. And at that point, do you want to continue to support those policies and say, "Oh yeah, nice job, Trump"? Like,
Right, and I don't
oh
wanna
man,
get us banned, but there's that amendment, and
yes,
even leftists have, legions, and they're training right now, okay? And then, those groups from the 2, they exist in Ohio and Arizona and you know, like, it is kind of like a Tinder keg that we're sitting on here because we have, like, a maybe a much more open society, but also, like, a lot of scale, a lot of will, a lot of wealth, and then, like, no problem with direct confrontation with the government. Look at Korea. Uh, their president obviously couldn't deal with the opposition. So the best thing that he could think to do was declare like a federal sweeping martial law. Oh my God, what an idiot. Civil society exploded on his ass.
yeah,
Uh, and he couldn't hold the power. So like, not everyone is Erdogan, where they're able to successfully arrest the mayor of Istanbul and maintain the power, right? Erdogan's on his way to be like a smarter, wealthier Gaddafi or something, or a more successful Saddam. But I mean, he's
right.
a member of NATO. Like the world doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And at least for the U.S. power is much more decentralized, especially because you pointed to number two. uh, that makes a huge difference.
It
Um,
does, though.
yeah. The other thing is just one incident, one person, if they get killed by cops, even if they're using so-called less
Uh,
lethal munitions, for a while
uh,
they used to say like less than lethal, but then they're like, oh, actually, these things do sometimes kill people, so they say less lethal. Well,
goodness.
if someone becomes the new George Floyd, someone to rally behind, and that essentially becomes a martyr, that's how the movement really escalates, not just within
Especially if it's ice.
LA or California. Right, exactly. So,
Like, well, and ICE is hiring all these new people that really haven't held the badge, and they're bringing these new people that are holding the badge for the first time into law enforcement, and that's also dangerous because, like, not only is increasing its operations, but it's also like increasing its amount of new hires. So you have a lot of new people holding the badge in ICE. And like I talked to Chicago PD briefly today at the march,
mhm,
and I was just commenting on just kind of the way that they handle the crowd versus like what I see in Dayton or what we've noted in Los Angeles, some of the things I've seen in Denver or some of these other areas. But he's like, well, first of all, we do a lot of training. And he's like, second of all, we get a lot of practice, right? So, like, how many protests are there a day in Chicago? 10. Um, so they have a lot of exposure to these kind of social dynamics. Obviously, they're not going to be perfect, and we're going to critique them as well. And we even have former chiefs of police and other experts in civil rights, civil liberties that are going to speak on this too. So they're not perfect, but like some of these agencies like have no idea what they're doing. They bring crowd control way too soon. They're still holding on to those like baseball bat length batons. Uh, they put on too much hardware, right? And then the president is telling protesters that they can't hide their face, then take the mask off of every law enforcement officer in ICE, right? Like,
yeah,
can you tell people what to wear in public? I mean, as long as you have clothes on, like, what? We can't cover our face because you can't run your Palantir facial recognition models? Like,
yeah,
what? I thought it could see eyes.
yeah.
I
No,
mean,
exactly.
like,
Well, yeah, we're not quite at Minority Report and super retinal scans from any direction, but yeah, it's definitely concerning. But
Well, they are scanning our face at the airport.
Yeah.
Look at this. I'm just pulling the shot in really quick. We don't want to get banned by this feed. But see, this is like the kind of shit I think that gets blown out of proportion in the trad media, those trads. Um, because like I'm not justifying this, okay? But it is
Hmm.
just a car that's burning on fire. Let's see if, we can get the fire department in there to put the fire out, and let's see if we can get people to move further away from the fire, and let's see if we can use some gentle crowd dispersion tactics and kind of like let it burn. It's like a wick on a candle. Like you do need to let it burn for a little while. It's only going to last so long before people literally lose the desire to be involved, or I mean,
Yeah.
we've been to hundreds of protests in the last less than a year. They have exciting moments, definitely. But everyone would agree for the most part, it's not that exciting. And on top of that, rarely do you ever get like a national news stream on television or any kind of national coverage, let alone international coverage. At the march today, the New
Hmm.
York Times was there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they wanted to talk to Omar and Byron and a couple others because Omar and Brian were both at the escalation scenario that took place with ICE on Wednesday, or was it Thursday?
Yeah, it might have been Thursday, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like when you have like that kind of national media presenting themselves to maybe there's probably about 1,500 people today. It was a good movement for what, how these actually work, not how they get projected in media. 1,500 is pretty good size.
Hmm.
But you had the New York Times there and, a bunch of the local affiliates. Almost no heckling. But that's another thing is like hecklers will try to create tension with the protest. The protests start to become a little bit disorderly if they start to react to that heckling. How does the law enforcement handle that? Does the law enforcement know the top leadership of the movement? Do they have good communication between officers to kind of like know they need to isolate the individual that's heckling, because at the end of the day, their job's public safety. And when we're watching people march down the street, they're practicing the First Amendment, which is protected, right? But it's like
Yeah.
these days, we don't even know what is protected anymore. It's like, is there a constitution or a legitimate court? It's like a gray area now.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, and then also, at least for Chicago's case, I mean, we rarely see counter protesters, so I think that that keeps things kind of calm there. I see quite a bit here in New York, um,
Yeah,
but I haven't been to a protest that was explicitly for immigration, and haven't seen a bunch of counter protesters show up there. But if at some point, someone akin to the Proud Boys shows up and they're more or less supporting what ICE is doing, that's also something to keep an eye on as well. So
that's true.
they seem to be pretty one sided, but um, Antifa types, they're certainly still active in the Pacific Northwest. I don't really see them. I haven't seen them in Chicago or New York at all. Well,
Right.
I,
Well,
I met I
they're
met
popping
one
up
one
in
guy
Portland.
who. What's that?
Antifa apparently is popping up a bit in Portland, and Portland and Seattle are starting to coordinate more heavily right now.
Yeah, well, I remember. I think it was a couple weeks ago. There was some like Christian event in Seattle, and a bunch of I think it was primarily trans activists and people related to Antifa or whatever, and things got kind of spicy there because we hadn't really heard a lot about them in a while because they kind of calmed down during the Biden administration, like after yeah, yeah. Certainly for like the past 4 years, their name hardly popped up at all. But now, with Trump back in office, they seem to be kind of back in action, but in limited territories. But I haven't really seen them um, here in New York hardly at all.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Also, I'm just showing like some of this footage from the protest, and that this is the kind of thing, like, in my opinion, is that if you the law enforcement in the jurisdiction has a responsibility to kind of maintain the monopoly on violence or to restore order, even though that is like a layered process and can take a while. One of the issues I think with like restoring order is when it becomes too militant. So like,
Mm.
and that guy was just throwing pepper spray, there's gas. We have not been to a protest yet with officers that looked this militant, have we?
No, not even close.
This is like unreasonably militant. Like
Yeah,
Chicago, even Chicago uses a tactic where they'll make the first couple of officers at the front for really important or large protest events, not even wear a duty belt. Like they have a golf polo on, no arms. And then look at this. This is Los Angeles right now.
yeah,
Like, oh my God. And then if you're like an average Joe or like an everyday citizen, you're going to take it one of two ways. One, you're going to be like, oh yeah, they should get rid of those protesters. Or there's the other person that maybe is a little bit more radical like me that's like, oh my God, I do not want the police operating in my community like that. Are you kidding me? Like, what are they dealing with? Like, it's Los Angeles. People are wearing shorts and sandals, you know?
yeah. Well, also, even just psychologically, as an officer, when you are wearing those types of things, your mindset is probably going to be more militant as well.
Sure.
So I think people have to take that into account. So yeah,
And look at LA.
mhm,
This is live in LA. This is live in Los
okay.
Angeles. I didn't think LA would be the first to tip over. I thought we'd get the honors here in Chicago. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't picking LA because it hasn't um, until this point does it seem kind of quiet. But
Tame?
yeah, yeah, it really has been. So
Yeah, I mean I guess like the DNC was in Chicago. Um, Trump has a residence in New York City. Uh, the Democrats are like strong in the Northeast, they're like pretty consolidated in certain ways. They have like a lot of
mhm,
influence out here. Our cities in a lot of ways are like closer together, more densely populated, whereas like California can like create its own ideas and ideologies like witchcraft or uh, Eastern philosophy at yoga. Like, I mean, I don't think you can like go to Connecticut and get the kind of Eastern philosophizing in yoga that you can get in Santa Monica,
right.
right? Um, and then, like the kind of like celebration of like all the esoteric and um, but look at this. Let me just pull this up again. Again, this is the kind of shit I don't think this would have happened today had Trump not decided to start running cycles on his military dictatorship.
Yeah. No, and then it makes me concerned that for future ICE raids, because I doubt those are going to stop, that he's going to have
Yeah,
even more beefed up security there, which is probably still going to further antagonize people. I was thinking about Obama's reign. His nickname from the left was "Deporter in Chief." Like
yep.
he
He
deported a lot
pushed
of people.
the he pushed the boundary on legality. He like pushed it further, I guess, apparently than previous presidents.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I guess the way in which he did it, he didn't get a lot of pushback, but also
Yeah, he didn't
he
generate
was
protest.
yeah. Um, and it wasn't done in a way to try and shock people where it's like Trump wants people
Get
to
these
be
Mexicans
shocked.
out of here.
Ugh,
Get all these foreigners, these foreign aliens occupying our country out of here, right? You know, the language is like inherently incendiary. And
yeah.
then, you know, the Mexicans have been in North America for way longer than the Europeans. I mean, are we being honest about this?
Yeah, well,
Like, think of how
especially if we're
many,
talking about California, like, areas that
bro,
used to be Mexico.
Texas,
Yeah,
bro, like, so like Mexican immigration patterns to North America are like, they're biblical. It's not, you know, it's not like a recent phenomena. And also there's like a number of Mexican Americans who have like longer standing American heritage than half the Trump administration. I mean, like Trump is third generation American, but you know how many Latinos are like 25th generation?
you're right.
You know, and then
Yeah,
and from North America, not Europe, wherever that is. I mean, I don't even see Europe. And I mean, what I'm in flatland. I mean, I can see the woman. Um, but so that's the other thing is like the kind of like unnecessary xenophobia, like clean up the domestic environment, reduce some of the immigration, decrease the flows of traffic through the border. That's normal. It's normal for a state to want to maintain its sovereignty, be able to have some control or influence over the people that are coming in. Why does he have to make it seem so ugly?
yeah. Well, and also to focus on like genuine threats, like people that are repeat known criminals.
Oh, you
But
mean those people that have the Palestinian flag?
not, not those ones. No, but I mean, especially in Chicago. I mean, we hear so many of
It's
these
insane.
stories of people that um, are here illegally, and then they commit a crime, they get released again, and then they commit an even worse crime. And it's just like, okay, if there's someone you're going to focus on deporting, it should be them. You shouldn't be focusing on
Yeah,
people that are here working and
trying to file their
contributing.
paperwork,
Right.
who probably have
Exactly.
kids at UIC or NYU or the University of Denver, literally.
Hmm.
Like that's the kind of shit where I'm like, all right, I feel the movement for feeling jumpy right now, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is like these crazy fucks that go out and like slam shit around and throw paint and bang on cars. These are not the average people at these movements. Like the average person at the movement has a job, went to college, might be married, a lot have kids, like has to be responsible because they're like looked at as like a leader or um and then like there's even like all different types of people. There's the nerdier folks that just read philosophies and watch YouTube videos and they want to come chill, you know. There's the people
Yeah.
that like want to show their art off so they like play an instrument. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the average person at the movement, it's not as crazy as me, but it's
Yeah.
not the one that's like, yeah, bro, where's my baseball bat? I brought it down here just for this. That's like a separate thing. That's like an exploitation that occurs, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've seen very few people that come across to me as militant in any way, shape, or form. And I
Well,
think
unless we're looking at Patriot Front,
right, yes. If you're
because I
if you're talking
mean,
about
they're
yeah,
soldiers. They
yeah,
have to be because their group is so small.
yeah, no, I know.
It's not the only thing.
Yeah, no, they're kind of a joke, but it'll be interesting to see. We haven't really seen anything from the right marching in any of these streets.
No.
They only show up to DC and they have small numbers, but
Yeah.
they've got no organization at all.
But see, this is going to translate into the midterm because what you have right now is you have like an extremely active left. Okay. And then you have like 30 Democrat campaigns getting announced every day. Have you noticed?
Oh
So,
yeah,
like, so the Democrats are physically running. Okay. what are the I don't even know, like, are the Republicans running in the next cycle, or is Trump gonna, like, take, like, 25 GOP seats for
Yeah,
himself, plus
I don't know
the White
what
House?
what can they even run on at this point? Because what was the focus
Oh, the
when Trump
economy?
first? Mhm.
Can
Yeah,
they
well,
run
I was
on
gonna
the
say when
economy?
yeah, they definitely can't do that. And the first couple months, the focus was on Doge and how they were going to like revolutionize
Oh,
the
yeah.
federal government. And that was a complete
Look at all the
bust.
money they saved us. They can run on
Yeah,
savings.
and then you got big beautiful bill that is
Oh, yeah.
tearing the right apart. You know, you've got
Oh,
Rand Paul and Thomas Massey between the Senate and the House saying like this is getting insane,
what
and
do you mean
Trump is
Trump can't get his bill through?
yeah, but Trump's
Isn't
trying to
he
gaslight and pretend as if like this bill isn't outrageous. So yeah, I don't know what they can run on, and now that you've got Elon who still owns
immigration?
X, yeah, that I don't think that's going to be a winning one for them, especially at least on ICE policy. If this starts to escalate in cities, start burning
And
everywhere, they're
causes
going to be like,
unrest?
yeah, it, yeah, people don't want to see that. Even if they want less immigration, they don't want to see chaos and cities
And the
burning
most
again. I think,
conservative the most conservative law enforcement agency doesn't want federal police in its jurisdiction, period. Doesn't matter who the president is. That's gonna piss off, Bill the sheriff. And you know what happens when Bill the sheriff gets pissed off? Fuck around and
right?
find out.
Yeah, no, for sure. If the states or the cities request it, if for some reason they need the help, but to just say, um, for Trump, just say, I'm sending them, whether you want them or not, especially to send in the Marines, which is just yeah, absolutely insane.
Insane. And yo, I talk to actives, like these are our
Mhm.
friends, our family, our colleagues. I don't know any actives that would like touch us like that, bro. Like, and also our actives are not trained for policing. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't. And Hexath, like, can we just be honest about him? Like,
yeah.
he's a dumbass. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, like, the Secretary of Defense, like, I miss the days when the Secretary of Defense had, like, already, like, killed 20,000 people in Vietnam or some shit and was like a crazy fucking war hawk. Because at least we could see where they were coming from, okay? Or maybe they were hired by somebody in the energy sector that had, operating like a multinational energy company or some shit, right?
right.
But at least we could see where they were coming from. But like Hegseth is so unpredictable combined with how unpredictable Trump is. Hegseth was probably drunk last night when he was like, we're going to send the Marines out to, yeah, okay, yeah. The Marines can't even, come on. Sorry to all my friends back home. In Springs, I'm sorry about this. The Marines can't even handle the mountain men of Afghanistan. What are they going to do with 200 protesters in Los Angeles? Like, I mean, like, doesn't
Yeah,
even make sense.
it's no, it's crazy, and the U.S. is becoming more and more of an embarrassment to the rest of the world too, and that's another concern I have is like what has made America, the largely the leader of the world is how many people that continued to come here to make it better. But now, if people don't want to, if they start to flee or have second thoughts about not wanting to invest here as well because it's becoming so unstable and how that's going to hurt the economy and regular everyday people. There's so many consequences to these riots and how they're responded to. People, I think, just look at this in
Certainly.
isolation, like, oh, we just need to put down this riot and everything will be okay. Not thinking about what are the steps that follow after that and how it ripples into so many different spheres. And that's why you need a leader that understands the complexity of these things, not someone who relies on like Trump will just say, I have the best policies and the greatest policies just because I
Yes.
exist. Like
Yes.
he's never studied these things or spoken with
I
experts
don't need
from multiple
expertise.
sides. Yeah, it's like at least talk to
We don't
not
listen to
just
the
the
expert.
not just the experts, listen to experts on multiple sides to think what are some things that I should be thinking about. Um, it's not even consulting with our others. It's just I inherently know these things instinctually, and I think that's terrifying.
It is. And now I'm so confused. That's November 16th. Okay. I was gonna say, why would Elon be next to him?
Oh, Elon in the
What I
back,
was
yeah.
what I was gonna say is there's pictures of Trump like celebrating at the UFC fight last night, and literally he's like at the UFC fight while he's declaring a war in Los Angeles. Like, what a lazy fuck. Like, he should have gone to the Oval Office to make that proclamation, not send out a fucking memo like he's not the executive of the United States of America. Like, even the dumbest fucking dictator wants to get international media for some crazy dumbass proclamation. And he's like at the UFC fight, he sends out a memo like, "What, bro? Like, you run the White House. If you want to make that kind of proclamation, go to the fucking Oval." Like, I mean, some norms still make sense for if just stability. Now, to your point about how the world's kind of looking at our instability, like our
Yeah.
post OJ not guilty verdict, where we're like on a precipitous decline, going spending all of our money at the strip clubs and hanging out with hookers, and right, this is America, right? Everyone's watching us do this, right? And they're like, damn, you were so tight when you rushed for like 2,600 yards, but I don't know you anymore. Okay, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're in this moment where um Trump goes to the Gulf countries, which I don't even think he knows anything about how they like politic.
Mm.
Um, but here's my issue with Trump. He goes to the Gulf countries. They promise foreign direct investment. And it's like, hey, Trump, the environment's not good for their foreign direct investment. These guys aren't fucking dumb. Did you know they bailed our banks out before the Fed, bro? Okay. They know how to make money off of our downfall. Okay. He lets that foreign direct investment dictate his foreign policy, but no fucking money has flown. No capital. Just like you're saying, like, we're unstable, we're unpredictable, we're like on the cusp of like some type of unrest. He is transforming our political institutions. Like, who gives a fuck about the liberal international order? Everyone knows that's like behind us. But we do need to transition to something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is he transitioning us to something, or
Yeah, it's hard to say if he really thinks any of this stuff through.
did he end the war in Ukraine? But honestly, I think if Ukraine has will, let them brawl. Okay? Did he end the war in Israel and Gaza? Oh my God, like Israel is arresting Rima Hassan right now. And what's that woman from the global climate movement?
Uh, Greta?
Greta? She's getting arrested too. Like, the world is on fire. And then it's like, and then we go to Los Angeles. We go to Los Angeles, and then look, this is what we have in Los Angeles.
No, it's crazy, and because it's still early in this term, and we've seen the way in which he's acted. What does this mean moving forward? Like, is he going to suddenly reverse all the things he started with? Is he going to start? Is he going to become super chill all of a sudden for the next 3 years? Like, it's hard for me to imagine that. Um, so I have to think the midterms are going to be a bloodbath for the Republicans. Um,
I
so
agree.
anything that Yeah, and anything that Trump wants to do, he won't be able to do, at least legislatively. But if he thinks he
And
can
he's
still
got
send,
opposition from Elon too now, from Felon.
yeah, yeah, oh, absolutely. So I don't know. This is going to be very, very strange times. I don't think we've ever seen um, a president escalate things this quickly into a presidency. Um,
Well, and
and
think
then
of
also to have so many different factions that oppose him, not just on the left, but like you said with Elon, because he has a considerable amount of conservatives that align with him. And there's also libertarians who they appreciate the fact that he called out the fact that Doge ultimately didn't work and that, big beautiful bill is a giant joke. Like this could, I don't know if
and
Elon
there's
wants
a
to
Doge
more.
layoff coming soon.
mm,
Like Doge
I
is
don't know if
gonna
he
get
wants
laid
to.
off.
Right. I don't know if he wants to recreate or have a new form of the Tea Party, but once again, that was something that never uh, really changed anything either. It got Republicans elected, but as far as changing policy, it it never happened. We've had the same giant deficits and corrupt spending this whole time. So the only difference now is that the rest of the world has been more hesitant to buy our debt, especially between China and Japan. They've been buying less, and they've also, I think, slowly been unloading a lot of their U.S. holdings. So, okay, just because the U.S. got away with it in the past doesn't mean it can continue to do it. So, I don't know if this all unravels under Trump, but we're getting closer and closer to the point where uh, not that the dollar has to collapse, but like it could have a significant drop in the very near future if we don't reverse these policies. And there doesn't seem to be a political solution to them. So to me, that
Right.
says it is inevitable that we have, a significant um, fiscal and monetary crisis that will kind of coexist. So
And it'll
I
be
don't
great
know.
because it'll come with increased unemployment. It'll also come with this stupid idea that we're running this path down right now, which is facing the Pacific theater and preparing for war with China. Like, I'll be
Yeah,
damned if Trump is the president we go to war with China with at the helm. Like this place is going to fall to shambles. Now, I'm not saying we can't pick it back up, but I do feel like it's like how many crises, like we're pretty brittle, like people are still like not recovered from the pandemic, and like all the like policy intervention of the last like 4 months of the presidency, like people are like, is there any benefit? Because all I see is cost. It's like, and then
yeah,
I mean, like, I don't care what an individual thinks about protest. The government has the responsibility to handle its people like it worked for them. Okay. And if people are getting chaotic and into disarray, it like the civil society, the elites, and the government, they kind of form a triangle. We're all bound together. We're fucking stuck with each other, right? The elites use us as the means to the end to shape the government. The government uses us as the means to shape the elites. And then we're down here like trying to check a ballot. You know what I mean? And like run a protest and run disruption. But we're all like stuck together. So like to think that like we have a good government and good elites and just bad people in the streets, please. Everyone needs help. Look at our icons. Like it's just yeah. So Ryan,
hmm,
they're just talking about what's coming up. I'll be in Chicago for No Kings. It should be cracking. We might have one of our homeboys in Washington, D.C., just to give us some footage. You'll be at a conference?
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I'll be out of town and won't be on the ground for no
That's
kings.
fine.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
um, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of big things popping up through the rest of the summer and for the rest of the year. So,
And
um,
for the rest of the night, because
yeah,
So what I would just tell everyone that's listening and anybody that like really follows us is be prepared for us to like come on some lives randomly because I just think that this is going to fire up other geographies. And Tuesday there's mass a call for mass mobilization in Chicago. Again, we'll be looking for New York, so we may be on the ground at one of those. But either way, we'll be at No Kings, Chicago on Saturday. And as you always know from us, like we're not going to bullshit you. And protests are a really interesting way to get an idea of like what the political climate is like. I just have to show this again because I just want to say that this is partially the government's fault. Um, it just, yeah. But again, it's just a car burning and a little bit of like just judging by what we're seeing here, and knowing what we know on the ground. Maybe there's, I mean, by the time this starts, most people leave. To be honest, like this one didn't get big, so maybe there's like 2 or 3 thousand people there now just watching the cars burn. Send the military in. There's a car burning because there's no Los Angeles Fire Department.
Right.
And what happened to slaveholders' rights? Aren't these like the slaveholders' rights guys that are like states' rights? Let the states control their sovereignty, their destiny, right? These are like the states' rights guys that are like the fire department in LA can't handle that. Those are
Right.
2 Waymos, by the way. Hopefully, Waymo has
Oh, yeah, they're on fire.
a good insurance broker, and then like
Yeah.
our ad pops up. No,
Right.
no.
uh,
Yeah,
good stuff.
yeah. All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right. Sounds good. Peace, everyone.
Peace.